G'day and welcome back to Reality Check Q&A, where you get to ask me, your host, Ross Coulthart, the tough questions. And here to help me in the excoriating analysis is Meagan Ourada. G'day, Meagan. How are you?
Ross, just doing great. How about you?
Very well, thanks. Obviously, we're in the middle of a drone flap right now. Goodness gracious me, it's happening again.
Yep, we will start right there, Ross. President Trump, he has addressed this. Comments were short and sweet, but it's about the mystery drone incursion in Denmark. There's a lot of speculation going around that this is Russia. President Trump said, I know about it. They don't know what happened. Viewer Andrew reached out to us on X. He said, Ross, do you believe the New Jersey drone incursions and the recent Denmark incursions are all related or connected? Asking because the drones are still flying over my house in New Jersey.
Good question. We don't know yet, and that's the whole point. Why are governments repeatedly, as happened in CONUS in the United States, asserting that these objects, I'm not going to call them drones, are in fact linked to foreign state actors like Russia or China? Where is the evidence? As the president has said, they don't know what it is. Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about how in Copenhagen, Denmark, on September 22nd through to 23rd this year, there were sightings of 2 to 3 large unidentified objects near the Copenhagen airport in Denmark. It shut down that airport for 4 hours and about 100 flights were disrupted. And there were similar disruptions. There were follow-on disruptions at other airports around Scandinavia. Now, the Danish authorities immediately referred to it as an attack, and they're pointing the finger at Russia. And there's suggestions that because there was a bulk Russian carrier crewed by Russian crewmen about 80 kilometers away, that somehow these dastardly Ruskies have been able to insert a drone into some of the most secure airspace in Denmark, a country which has some of the world's best radar, and somehow get those drones in without detection and out without detection. This strains credibility. Now, obviously, there's the beginning of the disinformation. They're now trying to claim it might have been civilian aircraft, and there's the usual suspects, the squawking seagull crowd, who basically suggest that we're all hysterical and that it's all a big confusion about nothing. I was talking to my friend who helped us with the Greenland story, lawyer and investigator Martin Kleist, earlier this week, and Martin was at Copenhagen airport right at the very moment that all of this was going down. And he said that the police and military response was hysterical. There was absolute out of control concern. This wasn't just a drone flap. There's a lot more behind all of this. He said that at one stage, he was accosted by a Special Forces policeman who demanded to know, what did you see? What did you see? I'm going to be hopefully talking to Martin later in the week. But what's really interesting is the correlation between the Copenhagen incident and, dare I say it, the slightly less frequent but still ongoing incursions in continental United States. Contrary to the disinformation that's being put out by certain agencies, this has not gone away. I am still in touch with people, including police and local government in New Jersey. They're telling me they're still seeing these objects. My friends John and Jerry Tedesco are still seeing these anomalous objects, including in the flight paths on the approach to Kennedy Airport at New York. This is serious, and this is why this matters. The whole issue of UAPs, of unidentified objects making incursions over secure airspace, especially crowded passenger airports like Copenhagen or JFK, New York. This raises really grave flight safety, national security concerns. And it's a huge concern when governments start defaulting to the explanation that it's the dastardly Ruskies, or as happened in New Jersey, the dastardly Chinese. Where is your bloody evidence? Why make these allegations without any proof? The simple fact is, I am being told by multiple sources we have no idea what was responsible for the New Jersey incursions and the incursions that are still ongoing across different parts of the United States, including over military bases. I've spoken to somebody 2 days ago who's been sending me videos from Florida near Eglin Air Force Base. These incursions, whatever they are, may not necessarily be drones. There are people that have described to me seeing orb-like objects coming into airspace and then in some way morphing into shapes of aircraft. I have people that have shown me images of what look like the shapes of a 737 or a commercial passenger jet moving at impossibly slow speeds over parts of New Jersey and New York. It's the same in Copenhagen. Martin tells me that some of the witnesses in Copenhagen estimated the size of this object as the size of an A380 aircraft, the largest commercial passenger jet. Whatever these objects are, I really think we're at the stage where we need to stop swallowing and just accepting glibly the explanations from government agencies who default immediately to it must be the Ruskies, it must be the Chinese, and then they start saying, oh, it was misidentifications, it was civilian aircraft. You're a bunch of hysterics, you got it all wrong. There is clearly something invading the airspace of certain nations around the world. It's actually happening in Russia, China, Japan. It's happening everywhere. It has diminished a lot since the November, December, January incidents over the north of America, but it's still happening. And the interesting thing is nobody has ever provided a shred of proof to establish that Russia, China, or any foreign state adversary is responsible for these incursions, which, if you think about it, is insane. If something the size of an A380 was coming into the airspace of Copenhagen's airport, you would know for a fact that any kind of aircraft would be seen on radar, early detected, jets would be scrambled, the source and the origin of the drone or object or whatever it is would be traced. That hasn't happened. Wake up, people. Something is much more significant here than we're being allowed to know. Why are governments persistently trying to blame Russia and China? I know it's an easy default explanation, but if you remember, there was that Representative Jeff Van Drew in Congress in North America who came out and said that the drones over New Jersey were an Iranian mothership. That never came to anything either. At what stage do we start seriously questioning the veracity of government statements when they issue so many contradictory assertions? Remember, we were told that the drones over New Jersey were FAA authorized research drones, which was a total lie. The FAA came out and categorically denied that they had authorized any overflights in that area. Then we were told it was misidentifications of civilian aircraft, which is also contradicted by two Pentagon generals from Northcom NORAD, General Glenn Van Herk among them. I mean, these guys are really senior generals, and they are admitting what the president has now admitted about Copenhagen. We don't know. And why don't governments just admit they don't know? It's as simple as that. Rant over.
Okay, we will go to your next favorite government entity, AARO. They posted on X this week, see official UAP imagery on AARO's website, including resolved and unresolved reports, as well as a tranche of newly declassified videos from US European Command. So, just for fun, I did go and click on that link that they posted, and they have posted new videos. These are from incidents from 2022. And then the dates that they added them in 2025, all in September. And they're saying resolved as a balloon, unresolved, not anomalous, balloon, balloon, balloon. Your reaction to these new balloon resolved reports?
Look, I'm really sorry. I just can't take Arrow seriously anymore, and I don't think anybody does. I think the government's hope that they could contain public interest in the UAP phenomenon by creating an agency inside the Defence Department that's accused of covering up this issue is failing. Sadly, even though I do know there are good people in AARO, among them Dr. John Kozlowski, who's very well intentioned, the Office of the Undersecretary of Defence Intelligence is doing its level best to have an unsavoury influence on the determinations that AARO makes, and frankly, it's the fox in charge of the henhouse. AARO simply can't be trusted because of who it's working for. And I completely agree with the Representative Anna Paulina Luna and Representative Eric Burleson, who have flagged very strongly that we should have no longer any faith at all in AARO and that we should no longer trust the Pentagon with doing investigations into UAPs. The investigation into unidentified anomalous phenomena needs to be taken away from the Defence Department and the intelligence community. Their malign, often malevolent influence needs to be removed, and the agency needs to be genuinely independent. And I suspect that's going to happen. Keep a really close eye on ongoing FBI investigations. I'm told Kash Patel is ensuring that there is a rigorous and thorough investigation. And in my dealings with the FBI, I've had a very good sense that these people are genuine and well-intentioned. I don't get the same feeling about the people who are controlling AARO.
Okay, we will go to an email from Zane. Thank you for all the content and hard work you two do on a daily basis. My question is, if the US was to get into a military conflict with Russia or China, do you think we would see these exotic or advanced crafts in battle? Is there any external conflict important enough to win that we would see these be used? Any insight you can provide would be appreciated.
That's a very interesting question. I mean, one of the explanations I've been offered, I suspect some of it's speculative from people purporting to know what's going on inside the legacy retrieval and reverse engineering program. They offer the explanation that one of the reasons for the secrecy is that we want to ensure that when I say we, I mean America, the Western Alliance, the Five Eyes Alliance, has dominance in terms of any potential conflict with a foreign adversary. The concern from the sources I've spoken to in the program, with direct knowledge, they assert, of what the US has and what the US has done with that technology, is that because of the excessive secrecy surrounding the program, we have been overtaken by China in particular. But the concern, and as you would have heard on Reality Check a few weeks ago, I've talked about the Russians as well, the Yamantau mountain complex, where there are a lot of developments of super weapons that are happening amongst the Russian scientific community. The concern is that Russia and China have been able to develop an advance over what the US has done with these technologies. And we just won't know. Frankly, I find it very sad that if there is retrieved non-human technology, it's potentially being held back from the public and kept secret so that we can win the next war with it. What would that say to any potential non-human intelligence that's having a look at us from afar, wondering if we are perhaps worthy of membership of some greater community of non-human intelligences? I suspect they'd take a pretty dim view. I mean, we have to forget our warlike tendencies and maybe find different ways of resolving conflict. But yeah, I mean, I do think that the United States has developed weapons. I've talked openly about scalar weapons and pulse beam technology before, plasma beam technology. I do believe that those weapons are in development, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we were holding them back in reserve for potential conflicts. But I think what we have to be very careful about is whether the Russians and the Chinese have developed something similar or better.
Okay, UAP Jedi on X. Hi, Megan. In the next Q&A, could you ask Ross about NASA becoming a national intelligence and security agency? And could it mean an increase in its budget through undisclosed black budget funding? Also, what does it mean for any potential disclosure of precursors of intelligent life being found on exoplanets?
Look, I spoke to somebody in NASA about this, and they told me they thought it had more to do with the Trump administration's intention to impose massive budget cuts on the space agency, and that they're trying to avoid a fight with the labor unions by categorizing NASA as an intelligence agency, which means that the labor unions can't have the influence and power that they would if it was just a normal civilian agency. I mean, let's be realistic. NASA has operated for all of its life as a quasi-military intelligence agency. Most of the programs that are being launched by NASA through mainly SpaceX, because they can't fly a rocket themselves most of the time, is intelligence, classified material, spy satellites, and things like that. So there's already been a lot of intelligence work by NASA. And I'm always reminded of the fact that my friend, the spaceman, who was a close friend of astronaut Edgar Mitchell on Apollo 14, Edgar Mitchell told him that the Apollo astronauts were aware of non-human intelligences following each moon mission out from Earth, following them and watching them while they were on the moon, and then following them back to Earth. And when he was asked by the spaceman why he'd never spoken publicly about it, Edgar used the one word: treason. And that's a story I tell in my book. And it's interesting because it shows just how much of a quasi-military agency NASA is. And people need to look. I mean, honestly, the origins of NASA are very much rooted in the Nazi spies, the Nazi military that were brought out during Operation Paperclip after the Second World War. Much of NASA is rooted in intelligence and defence. So it's no huge surprise to me. I suspect it's got a lot to do with the decision to try and cut NASA funding. I do think NASA's origins are very much rooted in the defence and intelligence community, and it doesn't surprise me at all that it's being categorised as an intelligence agency, but I think that's got a lot to do with the Trump administration's intentions to take on the labour unions and impose massive budget cuts on the space agency. And if they are imposing budget cuts on the space agency, why would a US government administration decide that the space agency of the United States was largely surplus to requirements? Go figure. Interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely. We have an email from Mark that came in. In a video on YouTube, it is claimed that the Skywatcher program actually got a UAP to land in the presence of NASA. Have you heard anything about this from any of your sources? There didn't seem to be anything about it on Skywatcher website last time I checked. This is something you may want to ask the people at Skywatcher about and maybe even offer to do an interview with them. Hopefully, this would be something that they can agree to and not be restricted by any NDAs.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Look, I have heard about an incident which I have not been told about officially. I'm aware that two psionic operators went off on their own. They weren't wearing cameras, they weren't carrying any kind of video equipment. And in the course of an encounter, a summoning that they were trying to do privately, an object, a craft, did apparently land in front of them. I'm assuming that this story is being held back by Alex Clocus and Skywatcher for what I'm told we can expect to be the next installment of their videos that they're producing, which they often put up online. They've put two or three previous videos up online. And this next one's meant to be on psionics. So I've invited Alex Clocus, Skywatcher, multiple times. We have an open invitation to Skywatcher to appear. I do think, in the interests of public disclosure, it would be great to get somebody from Skywatcher on at some stage to talk about what they're up to, because it's one of the things we get questions about more than most. People are really interested and excited and happy to see that there is an organisation that's properly funded, that's doing good work investigating UAPs. And they have, including to me, made multiple promises about being transparent and open. And I am, like everyone else, getting frustrated with the degree of secrecy surrounding the Skywatcher operation. I can only assume it's because they want to make their own films and do their own media, and we welcome that, but it would be great at some stage to get Alex Clocus, Jake, anybody else from Skywatcher who's interested in coming on and talking to actually talk about what they've been doing, especially with the psionics. And yes, we've heard about this incident involving an alleged landing. Carl Crusher mentioned it to me when we were doing the work with Magic Mike Batista a few weeks ago, and we really haven't heard any more. Love to hear more.
Okay, Ruby on X, they posted a flyer and tagged us in it. Rumors and public advertisements are stating that a paranormal fair being held in France will be revealing one of the alien Roswell bodies in a glass case under high surveillance. They're asking us, are the French about to unveil one of these bodies, or is this all rubbish?
I think we can safely say pretty damn quickly this is a steaming pile of, I don't know what the word is for BS in French, but I think we should be skeptical. I have not heard of any claim at all that a Roswell body has been released to anyone in France, least of all to a paranormal fair. I can imagine that the biologics, as David Grush referred to them from Roswell, are locked up pretty damn tightly in a vault somewhere, and I'm told it's somewhere in Virginia. I don't think we're going to see them anytime soon.
Okay, so we will all cancel our airline tickets to France. Perfect. All right, we will go to Dave on X. Hi, Ross and Megan. What is your opinion on the latest news that has come out recently, mainly via Dr. Stephen Greer, about the Buga Sphere with carbon 14 testing purportedly showing that resin connected to the material is 12,500 years old?
Okay, the Buga Sphere. Again, another subject that we get a lot of queries about. Yes, I have taken a very, very close interest in the work of a friend of mine, Patrick Jackson, who we will hopefully be bringing on the program sometime soon, who's talked about what he thinks is a sphere network that operates around this planet. The Buga Sphere is a metallic orb that was reportedly filmed hovering and maneuvering over a place called Buga in Colombia in early March this year. The witnesses described it as a shiny, engraved sphere about the size of a bowling ball. It weighed initially about 4 or 5 pounds, but allegedly the weight has somehow miraculously been able to vary at times. There's anomalous weight fluctuations, is the term, including allegedly up to 8 kilogram in changes without visible mass alteration. There are glyphs, internal layered structures visible via X-ray, claims of emitted low-frequency signals, claims that it's been responding to stimuli like Sanskrit chants. It was recovered by locals and it's been analysed by the prominent and controversial Mexican ufologist Yami Maussan and Dr. Stephen Greer, who have promoted it as potential non-human technology. Now, there are some interesting aspects of this object. Videos and scans do appear to show fibre optic-like threads and resin dots inside, which has fueled speculation of some kind of ancient, perhaps non-human origin. Is it a hoax? Look, we just don't know. And frankly, I don't think we can say it's either a hoax or authentic right now without rigorous, completely independent testing. Yes, the X-ray scans do reveal complex internal geometry. 3-layered spheres, fibre optic alleged threads. There's alleged anomalies with the weight, electromagnetic emissions. There's the glyphs apparently have been analysed by AI and they're supposedly showing patterns linked to Olmec symbols. There is a criticism, which is that the promoters that it is an authentic object are at the moment not handing it over to an independent laboratory. And frankly, who can blame them when we know what happened to previous spheres in the 1970s? There was a family in Florida that found one of these metallic spheres. They handed it over to the US Air Force and it came back inert. It had changed from what they personally witnessed and filmed. So what are the arguments for a potential hoax? we have to be upfront and say that Yami-Masan, albeit an extremely well-intentioned and I think very decent man, he's been accused of mistaken beliefs before. There was the alien mummies incident involving Stephen Greer, the Atacama object, which I think Professor Gary Nolan definitively proved to be of human origin, even though there are many in UAPology who take issue with that. The glyphs, well, I mean, anybody could get a metal ball and engrave it on a metal ball and make it look mysterious. There's no independent verification. I mean, it would be great to, to see something other than unaccredited labs making these claims. My issue with the documents that they've cited from these labs is that they've got typos. There's been misidentifications. It's really weird. So you need third-party lab access. What else did I think? Oh yeah, these resin specs. I mean, it's impossible to know. I mean, are they contaminations? We just don't know. I don't know enough about how the resin was obtained, whether there's a possibility of cross-contamination. Did the resin get stuck to the object when it landed on the ground? I know a lot of people will say that what it does, the resin, is it shows that the object, this is the whole point, is that it has a calibrated age of 10,510 years before Christian era, which is 12,560 years ago. I know Metabunks had a go at it as well. Stephen, what's his name? The Seagull guy, Mick West. Bottom line is, I just don't know. I mean, I'd just like to see it rigorously, independently tested. There have been claims before like this which have been disproven. I think we should enter into it extremely skeptically. But yeah, I'd like to go and have a look at it. And Yami-Masan has invited me to come to Mexico. And when we have NewsNation's bloated travel budget, we will zoom down there on our private jet and we'll go and have a look.
Absolutely, Ross. I'm going to give you one more for today. This is from George. Has Ross ever read The Law of One, also known as the RA contact material? I ask this because the entity known as RA makes very specific claims that Ross may be able to verify. For example, RA states that the US had ARVs in the 80s.
Okay, The Law of One, Ra. This is a very extensive series of alleged channeled messages. I've looked at this, 106 conversations called sessions between, I think he was a physicist called Don Elkins. He was a professor of physics and a UFO investigator. And he said that he was talking to somebody called Ra. They were a supposed sixth density social memory complex that formed on Venus about 2.6 billion years ago. Humble messages of the Law of One. And that they'd previously tried to spread this message in Egypt with mixed results. So we're meant to assume that the references to the sun god Ra in Egypt are in some way connected to the Law of Ra. Frankly, what are we meant to make of this? I would like to see, I know that the correspondent suggests that there's been previous predictions that the US has got alien reproduction vehicles. It would be great in any of those channeling sessions if there was just one specific detail that gave us enough detail to be able to say definitively, wow, that is a piece of corroborative evidence that allows us to say definitively, wow, this person that spoke to this professor did say something all those years ago which can now be definitively corroborated. But in my limited reading of the Law of One, I haven't seen anything that is with sufficient specificity to say, well, yeah, that's really so specific it rocks my boat. It's not unusual that somebody might channel the idea to somebody in North America in the last few decades and suggest that the United States has been able to reproduce non-human technology. That's been the subject of speculation for many, many decades. I also think we should be skeptical of anybody that purports to be able to channel something unless there's independent corroboration. Skepticism, frankly, is always the best option. Skepticism is good. And I just don't think at the moment there's enough to be able to say definitively, yes, there is something to the law of one, or indeed anything to any of these claims that are made about channeling. I get so many people sending me claims that they've had channeled messages from non-human intelligences, and they all contradict each other. So they can't all be right, but is any one of them right? That's the issue.
All right, Ross, thank you so much. That is all for today.
I'm not letting you go so quickly, Meagan. So many of our viewers have asked me to ask you where you stand on UAPs. It's time, Meagan.
It's time.
We're not going to let you.
Ross, I think it would be extremely narcissistic and self-centered to think that we were the only life form on Earth. And honestly, when I think about space and the universe, I kind of get a little jumpy and anxiety. I actually just finished a book last night on NASA in the 80s and the Milky Way and all the galaxies. So to think that there's nothing else out there is a little lonely and a little scary. So of course, I think there's something else going on. And I love being able to do this journey with you on investigating that.
Well, our audience love you back. So thank you so much for giving us that opinion. And by the way, actually, I should mention, I've got to watch it yet, but my friend Jesse Michaels has apparently done a very interesting show on NASA just recently, which gets into the early origins of some of the really weird people behind NASA, like Jack Parsons, who was into Satanism and all manner of weird rituals. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, dark black NASA. I'm really interested in hearing more about it. Thank you very, very much, Meagan. If you do have any questions for us, you can send emails to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.